Now, in our previous video, we looked at some very basic HTML tags, things like heading tags, paragraph tags, list, etc. The idea was just to real basically display how are we going to get information, how can we display it to a screen. We used the HTML editor that came with W3 Schools to be able to try things out and test, and you could explore and you could add as much or as little as you wanted to that. Now, however, we want to look at making some design changes. Those design changes are pretty simple, and it's all done through something called CSS. That's short for Cascading Style Sheets. Under the W3 Schools, you can see there's actually an HTML CSS that's there that you can look at. It has some really basic things. We're going to look at what's known as internal CSS. That is, we're going to add a special tag to our head section, and it's going to allow us to change the way things look. So up inside my head section of my text, I'm going to add my open and closing style tags. Now, your CSS styles are going to be broken down into 3 sections. First is going to be our selector. So I want to change a particular tag. So I'm going to say H1, and then I'm going to use some curly braces. Notice these are braces, or sometimes called curly braces or curly brackets, depending upon where you might have heard the term from. This is going to contain a set of rules. And our set of rules can have as little as 1 or as many as we want. And so I'm going to pick color, and I'm going to make it red. And red is a built-in color that we can use. Notice I put a colon between the attribute and the value, and that's the other 2 parts. So we have our selector, H1. We have the rule set, and the rule set is made up of a attribute and a value. If I click on run here, notice that I now have this is my heading is in red. Any H1 tag is going to get this. So just as an example, if I say LI for my list item, and I notice how I have 2 different list items, I can come in here and say color blue. And it's going to do both of them. So my selector is going to find everything that matches. These are what we know as tag selectors. They're very simple. Now, I can make these a little bit more complicated. So, for example, I can say ul.li. So it's only going to find list items that are under or within, if you would, an unordered list. So if I click run, notice that my list items now display black, the default color. That is because it's part of an ordered list, and our selector specified unordered list items. Now we can get a lot more selective. We can do things like set up classes and IDs and a variety of different things like that. Not always necessary. Let's look at some other things, though, to see how we can work with them. I'm going to say specify H2. And let's say I want to put a underline underneath my H2. Well, I'm going to do border dash bottom colon. That's my attribute. Now I'm going to put my value. And I'm going to put 3 special values. And my border allows me to have these 3 values. I'm going to specify I want 1 pixel. I want it to be a solid line. And I'm going to specify a color. Now, instead of specifying something like red or blue or black or white, I'm going to specify a special color, and I'm going to use the RGB values. So I'm going to pick, for example, a dark to medium gray. So I'm going to say 777777. And there is a shortcut for that. I could have just said 777. We're not going to worry about that. But what this is each color gets a value between 00 and FF. And since it's RGB, we have 3 sets of those 2 numbers. If I click Run, you'll notice here that I get a nice thin line underneath my H2. Now, if you don't remember what all these RGB values are, that's because it's in hexadecimal numbers, which is why there might be letters and numbers. It's kind of weird. You can also put in RGB and then put some parentheses, and you can specify some numeric values like that. Since all 3 numbers are the same, it's going to be a grayscale. And you'll notice here's a little bit lighter gray than what I had before. If I want to pick something that was completely different, so let's say I want to make it purple, and I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger by making it 3 pixels. But a purple is red and blue, so I'm going to make my green much smaller and say Run, and you can see that now I have a purple type color. So if we go back to what you probably learned in elementary school in art class when you talk about mixing different colors to make new colors, this is what you do. You change the values of your red, your green, and your blue, and that's going to give you the ability to make most any other color that you're going to run into. There are a few limitations, but nothing that you would have to worry about at this point. You notice that I changed it to 3 pixels, so now it was a taller border. I can change this from solid, for example, to, let's do dash. We'll do dashed, and you notice it gives us a dash line. There's a variety of different types of borders you can put on your elements. This is true of almost any HTML tag. You can apply things like your border, color, background color, just a whole wide variety of things. In fact, you might go, well, what happens if I don't want to have a default white screen? It's glaring to me. Well, when you realize that your HTML and your body are both tags, I can come over here and say body. Background dash color, and I'm going to use the RGB since I showed that earlier, and instead of white I'm going to make it just a little bit off just to make it a little bit easier to see. 25225, and notice how I just made it kind of a light gray. And you might go, well, that's too dark, it's too hard to read the text. Well, then you make it a little bit lighter, or maybe you make it cream instead of white. You've got lots of flexibility of what you can do. So this is just an example of some of the things that you can work with. Now, you might be asking, what other things can I do? I mean, surely there's got to be other things. And you're absolutely correct. So we're not going to worry about this CSS here under my HTML. I'm instead going to choose CSS tutorial. In our CSS, you'll notice that we have a whole bunch of other attributes and properties, and they have basic ones, advanced ones, etc. CSS is a huge area that you can really get into. So what you want to do is simply look at these and say, well, what do I need to worry about? Well, I want to look at my opacity, for example. So what can I do with my opacity? Or maybe I want to look at dealing with CSS with list, and I can see how do I want to display lists differently. And this is going to give you some information. So when you're working on your assignment, realize that you can go through and you can look at these. You can do a search online. It's the reason why we put search so early on, so you can look through them, and you'll be able to find the answers to create whatever you need to for your assignment.